Hello, John Bloodworth Gentleman Crafter here with more adventures in machine embroidery, and this week I've been trying out the applique creation features of the Hatch Embroidery digitizing software. So let's get into it. First, let's set up the hoop and import the artwork that I want to trace. So I've set up my machine, the hoop, and I'm going to set this to manual hoop position so the design doesn't move. I'm also going to rotate the hoop so that it's landscape instead of portrait. This is so that I can import the design and work on it at a larger size. I'm going to use this butterfly and I will resize it. By holding down Shift when you click and drag, it resizes everything proportionately, so it'll be double quick. I'm going to switch over to imperial measurements just so that I can make sure that it will fit within my maximum stitching area. It doesn't, so I have to drop it down just a little, and then I'll switch back to metric. For some reason I can't work between the two when it comes to stitches, but there you go. Anyway, so let's start setting up the applique for the wings. Okay, the first thing that I'm going to do is go over to the Digitize toolbox and grab the Digitize Closed Shape tool. I'll set this to be an outline, and I will turn on the trim feature and a single run. I'll zoom in on one side because there's a couple of cool tools that I'm going to use later that will save me a bit of time. And I'm going to start digitizing the wing. So I click to set the starting point, and then I'm using a mixture of left and right mouse button clicks. The left is indicated by a red circle here and the right by a yellow, and this is so that you can see the difference. These circles don't appear in the actual software. This is my screen recording software. But basically the left mouse button will give you a straight or sharp corner, and the right mouse button will give you a curved corner or point. So I can follow the contour of the wings much more accurately by mixing those up. When I get to the end, I press enter to set that in place. So that's one wing, and I could obviously manually digitize both wings. However, in the Create Layouts toolbox, I can mirror and copy what I've just done. Bish bash bosh, second wing done. Okay, so next up, I select the wing and convert to applique from the applique toolbox, and the same for the second wing. So what that's now done is created the placement stitch, the tack down stitch, and the satin stitch that will hold the wings in place. I'm just going to save the design now so that if anything goes wrong while I'm doing this, I've got a copy to come back to. Next up, I'm going to digitize some detail in the wings. For this, I'm going to use the freehand open shape tool. This is so that I can use my mouse and cursor basically like a pen. If you have a pen tablet or similar for your computer, you can obviously use that as well. Again, I'm going to zoom in on one half of the wing. And then I'm going to start just by left clicking and then dragging, holding the mouse button and dragging that cursor around along the contours or along the center of the area where I want to create the detail. Now, as I work along this, basically I will explain, I was trying to double up on every line where possible. So as you can see, I'm basically tracing along, then coming back, branching off, and then coming back. And this was to really give the stitch a little bit more depth and dimension Of course, if you wanted to, and you just wanted a single run of a single stitch, you can make it so. You would probably end up having to stop and start different lines though and have a fair few jump stitches. But with this technique, basically you don't need any jump stitches, so there's very little cleanup to do at the end of the stitch out. Now I'm currently working on the top layer, so basically working on top of where you can see the applique stitching, but later on I will use the sequence tab that you can see on the right to reorder things so that this detail layer will go before the applique layer. So these ends that currently look as if they're on top of the applique will be secured and hidden by the satin stitch. I left this in real time. Sometimes I speed the videos up, just because on this occasion I really wanted to try and do this as much in real time as possible when it comes to the digitizing, to show you how quickly you can actually create designs without having to speed up the video. Now every now and again on the grid you will see that red lines keep appearing. And this is because I have the snap to grid feature turned on. I actually forgot to turn it off before I started stitching. Now, this has made a couple of points fall out of place, so I'm just going around now once I'm finished and just tidying up a few of those erroneous points, either by deleting, changing their type, or just moving them. I love the precision control you've got in regards to this, because at the end of the day, once you commit and start stitching out, there's no changing things. But by creating in Hatch digitizing software, you can. Even after you've stitched out, you can come back and reposition things. So if you didn't like the final stitch out and you wanted to change something, you can always come back, open the EMB file, and make some changes. So just making sure the ends there will reach out into that applique stitching. Couple more changes. And then basically what I will do next is, as you saw me do before, use that mirror tool in the Create Layouts toolbox to mirror this over to the other side so that I don't have to redraw or retrace it. I can just literally copy and paste with the click of a button. It also means that basically I will have an identical wing on the other side, and it's not down to basically my precision on tracing. So there you can see I just resequenced the applique to be at the top. Now for digitizing the thorax, that's the body of the butterfly, I chose to use the Digitize Blocks tool. And this is so that I could use a specific stitch, which was the satin, or sorry, the tatami, and be able to control the width of that as it runs down the length of the body. So I start with my first two anchor points, and then the third one will come across, and then basically from there I'm creating blocks. And each of the parallel lines that you see me creating, so going from left to right like I did here, will control the direction of the stitching and the width of the stitching as well. And I'm not necessarily following the image itself where there is other stitching. I'm basically placing it right in the center so that it will stitch within the previous layer. And then when I'm done, press enter to set that in place. And there I have my thorax. Now there's the design with satin stitch, but there would be too much, it's too wide in some places. So I kept with the tatami stitch. And so that basically both sides of the body were the same, I used that mirror tool again. Then I set it on a diet and shifted the sides in, just so that it wasn't extending too far over that satin stitch from the applique. I thought about using the radial fill to perhaps give some kind of interesting dimension to the body or the head. I also thought about using the Florentine stitch to give it some curved direction. I tried out a couple of the other fill styles, like the ripple stitch. And it also played around with the outline and offset feature as well. Now, separating the applique out, because I wanted to do things in a certain order, meant that I needed to go to the colours option of the sequence tab. And I needed to break apart the applique as well, because currently it's grouped, but not in the usual way that you would expect. So the break apart tool I found in the Edit Objects toolbox. This meant that I could actually reorganize each element of that applique as well. So I could do both placement stitches first, both tack down stitches second, and then reorganize the applique of the wings to be much later in the stitching sequence. I decided to get rid of the outline as I felt that it would give too much density to the stitching in the center of the design. And of course I needed to make sure that the stitch detail came after the tack down and the placement and the tack down stitches, because it's going to go on top of the organza wings that I'm going to set in place. Just saving the design there because I'm happy with where everything is going at the moment. Now the body I decided to do last so that it would sit on top of all of the stitching. And then I thought it might actually just need a bit more reduction in width so that it doesn't necessarily get too dense where the wings meet the body. So next up I need to export the cutting files so that I can cut out the wings from the organza. So for that I go to the File menu and click on export cutting. Here I can choose what I export as cutting files, and I just wanted to cut the applique shapes. So I deselected embroidery shapes, kept applique shapes selected, made sure it was SVG, chose the file folder that I was going to save these to, and the name, and exported those. It was that quick and easy. Obviously, while I'm here, I saved the design, exported the design as a PES embroidery stitching file. And then the next job was to cut the applique shapes from the organza fabric. So I'm doing this in Canvas Workspace because I have a scan and cut machine. So I imported the wing shapes, there you can see. Obviously with an SVG file you could load it just straight into the machine from a USB stick. I thought so that I could show you something, I'd do it here. Then I transferred that over to the machine via Wi-Fi. Loaded up the organza fabric on the mat. Inserted the rotary blade. Positioned the design so that it would cut on the fabric, and then cut it out. This I then stuck inside the placement lines after stitching those out, and then it was time to move on to stitching the actual design. So the first job was to do the tack down stitch for the actual organza wings. The next run was the detail of the wings, so this is stitching those lines that I drew out. And then the final stage was the applique, the satin stitch around the edge of the wings, and of course for the body itself. And once that was all done, I can reveal the finished result, which was this. Very happy with that. I probably gave the butterfly just a little bit too much of a diet, but I'm quite happy with how this turned out. No issues. Nothing to correct, I don't think. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.